Hello, and welcome to this week's live weekly warm-up, where I go over a warm-up exercise, challenge you to implement it. I've been doing this for a year and a half now, so you all probably know how this works. But I just want to reiterate how beneficial this could be for you if you watch these, if you've seen these here and there, but never actually done anything with them. I really encourage you to actually try it and maybe just play the exercise once and see how you like it. And maybe there's some exercises that you could see being very beneficial for you and some exercises that maybe aren't as beneficial for you. So don't feel like you have to do everything super diligently, but I encourage you to at least try it, because you have to remember that you can hear all of these wonderful warm-up exercises, but unless you actually play them and implement them into your practicing, they won't make a difference for your playing. So definitely do this, actually do it. And without further ado, let's get into the exercise for today. We've sort of been going along with this theme of taking long tone exercises and turning them into technique exercises and vice versa, and mixing them all around. Remember, the 3-step warm-up is long tones, technique, and articulation. So today what we're going to be doing is taking one of my favorite technique exercises and turning it into an articulation exercise. And this one, actually, the way it is designed is to sort of work this way on its own already. What I did was, in the book, this comes from the Next Generation Clarinet Method book. In the book, I'm kind of unclear, so I think this will be helpful if you are an owner of the Next Generation Clarinet Method. It's coming from the chromatic finger flexibility exercises. I've done weekly warm-ups in the past on the finger flexibility exercises, and the way that I have it written in the book is that there's just no articulation at all, but then in the instructions I say, for now, to slur everything. And now we've finally made it to the day where we're going on from slurring everything, and we're actually going to be doing some different articulations. So what we're going to do for this exercise is take those finger flexibilities and turn them into articulation by adding articulation to them. Part of the reason why I leave it completely blank is because I think this is a great exercise to do this articulation on. And there's some, like, I've seen some editions of the Barramon scales where you're supposed to do those with varying articulations as well, but sometimes they try to write it in, so it's like a slur with like some staccatos here and there, and it just gets really messy and confusing. So I just left it blank so that you can add in the articulations that you want, or no articulations, as you please. But today we're doing real articulations on it. So just to give a quick overview of what the exercise is it's just the stepwise motion, chromatic finger flexibility. So you're just going sort of between 2 notes at a time, back and forth, repeating a ton. And the original technique purpose of this is to get really comfortable moving whatever fingers you're going to be moving. In this case, I'm going to do D to D sharp and then E to E flat, just to get comfortable moving those fingers really precisely in steady rhythm with a great sound. What we add on to the articulation now is doing some specific articulation patterns on that, and then also keeping the fingers moving and good sound and all of that good stuff. So let me go ahead and demonstrate this. And what I'm going to do is a slur 2, tongue 2 pattern to start. And I also want you to listen to the length of the note. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. I recommend when you practice it, like, pick either legato or staccato or even accented if you want to practice your accents. It might be a little weird to do that, but either staccato or legato and stick with it. I'll sort of demonstrate both in this one playthrough and then talk a little bit more about other things you can do and how to get the most out of this exercise. So you can see how that was one measure of music, and I repeated it I don't know how many times, maybe close to 10 times. And I did some variety too. So it started very, very legato, then was pretty staccato, and then super, super staccato. And remember, throughout all of that, because this is an articulation exercise, we want to keep the same quality of sound on every single note, no matter how short or how long it is, and also go for really good consistency. And that's why I recommend you pick either legato or staccato. You sort of define what you're going to do and don't try to change it as you go, because it can sometimes get confusing. Is it an intentional change, or are you just being inconsistent? But hopefully that was clear when I went from legato to staccato to very staccato, and you could hear the distinct change. The point of this is to keep those fingers moving really precisely, and coordinate your tongue with it and get exactly the length of notes that you want in a consistent way as you're moving those fingers and getting a great sound. Now, I want to add another little disclaimer here. I think a lot of people make a mistake in their technique exercises by sort of tonguing too much. Most of my students, and when I was playing in band, even if we were just doing a 2-octave scale, the default was sort of always where it was tongued. Like you would do a scale and you would just automatically tongue the scale. I think tonguing in your technique part of your warm-up is actually more harmful than not, because when you tongue, it allows you to do whatever you want with your fingers in between. It creates a little space for you to not be as smooth and connected with your fingers. So with technique exercises, I always recommend slurring. And that's why in the Next Generation Clarinet Method book, on this page with this exercise, it says, for now, slur everything, because when it's a technique exercise, you should slur everything to hear the connections between the notes. And if you're tonguing, you should be focusing on what your tongue is doing. So that's what I'm doing here in this exercise. Of course, I still want my fingers to be good and my sound quality to be good, but now the focus is on the actual articulation and the actual tonguing. And that's what changes this exercise from a technique exercise to an articulation exercise, thus further proving my point that I've been making over the last couple weeks, that it does not matter at all what actual notes you're playing. The notes that you pick for these exercises may help you to get comfortable with some particular notes. For example, if you're not comfortable with going to the D sharp or E flat, this could be a good exercise for that. Long tones, if you do high notes, it's to get the high notes going. But the notes are separate from the actual focus of the exercise. The notes get you to the area of the instrument that you might need to work on, but the focus of the exercise, whether it's a long tone where you're focusing on the sound quality and getting your best sound and experimenting to get your best sound, or if it's a technique exercise where you're focusing on your finger motion, focusing on rhythmic precision while maintaining that good sound, or in this case, an articulation exercise where you're focusing on how the notes are shaped, how the articulation works. That's what really matters. It doesn't matter what notes you're playing. It matters how you're thinking about the notes that you're playing. Now, one other thing that I want to mention with this particular exercise that we just did, I just did slur to, tongue to, and that's just one of many, many, many options for different tonguing patterns. In the articulation section of the Next Generation Clarinet Method, there's the articulation patterns that have slur to, tongue to, slur 3, tongue 1, slur 3, slur 2, all kinds of different options for articulation for you to try. And you can do that on these. And there's some that get kind of tricky. For example, if you do tongue 1, slur 2, tongue 1, which in the book I call tonguing to the beat. That gets really complicated on this exercise. That sounds like this. So you can see, and if you're trying this at home, you can see that's a little bit of a tongue twister, brain twister, finger twister. Everything gets a little off in that one. But if you can do it, that's really amazing, because in music, sometimes we come across that pattern. And if you can't do it on a simple exercise like this, then you won't have much luck doing it in your music. So I think that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, even if you're watching this after it's live, feel free to leave a comment. And more importantly, I want you to actually try this exercise this week. And I want you to leave a comment with how it goes for you, if you like this exercise, if you found it beneficial. Next week, I think I'm going to do one more of these sort of cross warm-up style things. We've done technique exercise as a long tone exercise as technique, articulation exercise, or long tones and technique as articulation now. I think the last one I want to do is an articulation exercise as a long tone. So that'll be interesting for you to see and to check out next week. And then after that, I have something fun in store where I think I'm going to do a few weeks of how to incorrectly do each of these kinds of warm-ups, because I think a lot of people do things incorrectly, sort of like I mentioned with this technique exercises that you tongue. That's kind of a mistake, in my opinion, on how to do technique exercises. There's nothing wrong with tonguing your scales, but just know when you start tonguing your scales, it's more of an articulation exercise than a technique exercise. And it is important to put those things together like we did here, but it's all about what you're focusing on specifically. So I hope that gives you a little bit to look forward for what's happening in the next few weeks. I can't wait to hear how this one goes for you, and I will see you next week on the next live weekly warm-up.